welcome back to Killer Score, the podcast that covers cult classic movies with awesome soundtracks, cool composers, and gives you the attention that we think they deserve. So, let me start off by saying thank you. Thank you from all of us here.
Hey!
Thank you.
Yep. So this is officially our 100 subscriber special. Here we are recording this at nearly 300, and we will have another one of these popped out for you guys once we hit 500. All more of an incentive to keep subscribing. Seriously, though, your support means so much to us, and if you want the show to explode and you want us to do all sorts of other crazy stuff, there's our Patreon in the description you can subscribe to. We've got some cool Patreon goals in mind. I was thinking for our first small goal, we can re-record our lost episode.
We can do that, yeah.
Yeah, we will re-record our lost episode on Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Mm-hmm.
I have such vague memories of that movie that I need to rewatch it anyway, so yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll even bring in a guest for that one who hasn't seen it. So, this is our 100 subscriber special. Even like just subscribing to the $2 tier on our Patreon would help so much, guys. Like the lowest tier for us, that would help a lot. Because even if like 50 of you subscribe to it, that's like an extra bit of money coming into us.
Yeah, and that helps keep our podcast going. That pays for expenses such as gas getting here, studio equipment, all that fun stuff.
Exactly. Movies, just purchasing of the films themselves, and set dressing for when we do more of our, Patreon exclusive videos and actually do recordings of these. Once we get to a certain point, maybe we'll even have cameras set up to record us while we're watching it that we can put as little extras up on the Patreon.
Join the Patreon now and aid Killer Score's quest to make this studio look less and less like a murder basement.
Yes, and we are also currently working on setting up a community Discord, which is another reason you should join our Patreon. You can talk to us, suggest movies for the podcast, and, just general discussions, sharing your memes. We'll do game nights and stuff. So, yeah, thank you so much. Any way you guys can continue to support us, I'd appreciate that. Even just all the little things the algorithm loves, like commenting, liking, and just sharing these videos around.
Another thing I wanted to mention is that once we reach the the number of subscribers required, which I think is 1,000 on YouTube.
Yeah.
We can set up memberships as well as sponsorships to help keep this channel going.
Mm-hmm. So all that and more available if you guys would like to support us more. We appreciate you guys even just listening to the show, and it means a lot to us. But like any extra support you guys can throw in there would be awesome.
We love you guys. And in commemoration of this milestone, Dalton had quite the idea that I am quite excited for.
Yeah, so as you know, this podcast is all about cult movies, and there's few films out there that people who are familiar with the term sort of automatically think about in my mind when they hear the term cult film.
And what a better example is there of the quintessential cult film than Disney's strange black sheep live-action sci-fi film, Tron.
Yeah, like Tron is a go-to example I can think of when I have ideas of cult films. There's some other ones as well. Like Aaron, for example, what springs to your mind immediately when you hear cult film?
The first movie that comes to my mind is, of course, our lost episode, Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah.
Because everyone knows someone who's seen that, or knows someone who has been to a live show.
Exactly, yeah. It's just one of those movies, and Tron's like that. And I think Tron is one of the most iconic cult films, and even though it doesn't fit some of the common criteria, like being from, like a small release, not having a large budget, being a financial disaster, Tron is none of that, actually. It did okay at the box office. It wasn't some runaway smash hit, but it didn't fail. It didn't lose money. It just was from 80s Disney, and 80s Disney didn't have a lot of gangbuster success until like the end of the 80s.
I think Tron is something you could safely describe as a sleeper hit.
Exactly. And it's iconic because it's so beloved. It inspired so much. Like, I thought of putting together like a little section of this just with trivia of like, oh, here's the things Tron inspired. But I can't do that because there's too much.
Yeah, the breadth of this movie's legacy is so insane and comprehensive that I'm kind of partially nervous because I'm not sure my typical brand of rambling can do this film justice.
Yeah, and before I get into all the fancy dancy details about this, we really dig into Tron. I just want to know, how did you guys? What's your impressions of Tron, even if you haven't seen it, and how did you first discover Tron yourself?
Do you want to go first or should I?
It doesn't matter.
Well, I myself had no idea about this movie's release until, funny enough, I played Kingdom Hearts 2 for the first time as a child,
Yep.
where one of the worlds is space paranoids from Tron, and they go into the world of the computer, and they got Bruce Boxleitner back to be Tron.
Oh yeah, and it's that's interesting too because I'm not one of those people who played the Kingdom Hearts games when they initially came out. I don't know. I haven't talked a lot about my video game taste on the podcast before, but I didn't really get into RPGs in the way a lot of people did until I was like in high school.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was playing through the older stuff. And good friend of a podcast of ours, who I was lived in the same town as, he sort of introduced me to a lot of these old PS2, PS1 JRPGs, and he got me into Kingdom Hearts. And he always made sure not to spoil anything for me, bring me into surprise. And Tron is a complete surprise because, like the film itself, it kind of comes out of nowhere. It's not heavily advertised.
Right out of nowhere. Wasn't heavily advertised in the commercials at all.
Mhm.
I think Stitch
It's not on the box art at all either.
I think Stitch being a summon in that game got more ad coverage than Tron's presence.
Yeah,
in
they
that.
actually even do some stuff in the ads to kind of hide the presence of the Tron stuff to make it even more of a surprise.
And so it was after playing that game that I'm like, Tron? What's that movie? And then my dad was like, oh, it's that vinyl suit movie about computer programs and stuff. It's not bad. And I saw it and was simultaneously kind of giggling at it, but also kind of in awe because, as we'll soon get into, there's more to it than the admittedly dated effects.
And it's a very stylistic film out of itself.
Oh, yeah.
Like once you know it, it's instantly recognizable, and there's nothing else like it.
Yeah, it is instantly recognizable. I haven't seen Tron. I've seen bits and pieces here and there. I think I saw the ending of it back when it was on TV when I was probably in high school, I want to say. My introduction to Tron was actually Tron Legacy, which... Oh, sorry. Tron Legacy, which was a sequel that came out around the time I was in early high school. I want to say my freshman... No, it had to be my sophomore year, because I was my first high school boyfriend. So, and we went to see it on a date, and we both liked the movie. We didn't think it was too bad. He had seen the original Tron. I had not. I was more impressed by, like, the design and that kind of thing, as well as the motorcycles in it.
Yeah, the light cycles, yeah.
And also the Ducati that Jeff Bridges' son rides at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That movie is very much an action movie with Tron's heart painted over it, but it's still fairly entertaining. It's got good effects, and the direction it takes... It kind of honestly reminds me of Blade Runner 2049 in that regard.
Being a late legacy sequel, yeah.
But one that still carries enough of the spirit to be good.
Yeah, recognizable. As for me, I think it's probably my first, like, realizations in, like, introductions to Tron were the ubiquitous, like, pop culture references and parodies, because there was so much of them over the years.
Yeah.
I think my big intro to, like, my first area learning about Tron was probably one of, like, I think it was one of the early, like, Family Guy episodes where they do a parody with the Tron light cycles.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, like, just cartoons, everything loved to reference Tron.
Tron Guy.
Yeah, Tron
Tron
Guy.
Guy.
That was another early introduction to it for me. One of the most famous cosplayers and such an early internet, geek meme,
Yeah.
like the classic impact font text memes,
Yeah.
with the picture of the guy who's Tron Guy. And this movie is very interesting because it was created by a guy who loved video games. That was the whole inspiration behind Tron. Going into the trivia of this released in 1982, starring Bruce Boxleitner, best known for Tron, Jeff Bridges, best known for everything. Like, come on.
He's in everything.
Yeah.
Dude abides.
Yeah. And, of course, David Warner, who you probably know from, have you watched something British in the last 50-some years? You probably have seen something with David Warner in it.
Have you heard a British villain in an animated series? Chances are you've heard him voice that villain.
Yeah.
From Ra's al Ghul to, funnily enough, this one's for you, Dalton.
Yeah.
Nurgle from
Yeah,
The
Billy
Good
Mandy.
Adventures of Billy Mandy.
Yeah, David Warner's been in everything. I think he's even been in he's been in at least one of the 3 British staples that every British person has been in, which are Coronation Street, Harry Potter, and Doctor Who. Those are the 3 things that, like, at least one British actor has been in.
Yeah, like, it's funny because I think about it, and there was a running joke amongst it's like certain British actors who was like, I'm one of the only British actors who hasn't been in Coronation Street, Doctor Who, or Harry Potter.
Who said that?
Martin Freeman.
Yeah. And
That's surprising,
Yeah.
honestly.
But he was in the Hobbit movies.
yeah, but and like EastEnders is another
Yeah.
big one. This actually, the idea for this first came to mind back from director Steven Lisberger, and who's heavily involved in the animation field before this. And oddly enough, he's mostly known for this. Like, Lisberger's done some other stuff, but before this, aside from some background stuff, his most famous thing he was well known for before this was the 1980 TV special Animal Olympics. It's a thing. It's got a bunch of celebrity voice actors before that became a popular.
It was weird.
Yeah, it's before celebrity voice actors became like a popular concept. It had a bunch of TV sitcom staples from back in the day, like, Gloria Radner and I think Danny DeVito, some other notable people. I think even Billy Crystal was in it.
Yeah, this was back in DeVito's Taxi days, I think.
Yeah, because DeVito got his start in sitcoms.
Yeah.
So, but he came up with this concept all the way back in 1976 when he first saw Pong.
I was to say, was it Pong?
And when he saw Pong, it just got his mind racing, and he became like he immediately started a huge love affair with video games. And I would even argue that some of this film is probably inspired by some real life things that happen, such as the most famous landmark aside from the Space Paranoids itself and the world of the computer is the iconic Flynn's Arcade. And I believe there's a lot in Flynn that is taken from Alan Bushnell, one of the founders of Atari, who famously went into the arcade business after founding Atari. Alan Bushnell is the guy who founded Chuck E. Cheese.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because Bushnell made these video games, and he went, this isn't where the money is, though. He's like, the video games make money, but I don't see the money. The people who see the money are the arcade owners. And so he got the idea of like, wait, what if I can combine family entertainment with video games? I'm going to rake in the money. And he was right for a while until arcades fell out of the wayside because, yeah, the people who made money off of video games for a long time were arcade owners.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this was back when video games were seen less as creative outlets and more children's entertainment. Toys.
Yeah, and it wasn't until the early 80s that home video game consoles became popular. Before that, they were literally mostly known as Pong consoles, and that's mainly what people bought these boxes for, and most of them only played Pong. The most iconic early video game console that predates Atari is the Magnavox Odyssey, and that was basically just a trumped-up Tron machine.
Well, Pong.
Pong machine. Yeah, it was trumped-up Pong machine.
Go ahead and watch that old Angry Video Game Nerd episode for a retrospective on all those Pong machines.
Yeah, that was the big business. But Lisberger had the idea in his mind of, like, what if there was, like, a video game equivalent to something like Alice in Wonderland? So that was the idea behind Tron, of, like, someone falling into an unfamiliar world and combining it with his love of video games.
Pretty on-point comparison with Alice in Wonderland, because there is a lot of subtext beneath the initial fantastical joy of jumping into this...
Jumping into the unknown.
Yeah, jumping into the unknown. You'll soon see that there is a lot that this movie has to say about technology and about religion in particular.
I was also gonna say there are some I apologize if I go on a rant here. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is my favorite book. There are some interpretations that suggest that the oddities and everything surrounding Alice in the book is based off new math, which was becoming a thing in the 1860s.
Yeah.
Because Lewis Carroll was a mathematician and a math professor at Oxford.
Yeah. So you can even tie that stuff together because they're reactions to, like, burgeoning movements at the time. Both scientific,
like numbers.
Both scientific fields.
Yeah.
Yeah, computer science and mathematics. So it honestly is shockingly appropriate. So Tron actually existed as a character before the movie. He was created by Lisberger for a short he did, and the suit's design is actually loosely based off the Cyclones from the iconic Battlestar Galactica series.
Oh, yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, with the cubed helmet.
With the helmet.
Yeah, and the boxy outfit. Yeah.
Real polygonal.
Yeah. Tron was actually... His personality was actually based off one of the key figures for this film, which was the highly influential and important computer scientist Alan Key. He was the main scientific advisor on the film for computer sciences and was actually the one who suggested the use of CGI. That wasn't even thought of at the time. Like, Lisberger had no idea what CGI even was. Most people didn't. And funny enough, as he was working on the film and advising them, Alan Kay, who Tron's personality was based off of, actually ended up growing close to early draft writer Bonnie McBird, who's one of the credited story designers, and they ended up marrying as a result of this film.
Oh.
Yeah. Early drafts were a lot different, though. It was much more comedic, a lot more geeky in-jokes. Flynn was envisioned in early drafts as being played by Robin Williams to show you how different this film would have been.
That would have been a lot different.
Yeah.
Not a terrible choice for a borderline eccentric genius, but Jeff Bridges is kind of iconic in that role at this point, because it's Jeff Bridges playing someone who was kind of out of his type at that point.
Yeah. So it bounced all over the place. By the time it got to Disney, it was more serious, less scientific, and it kind of embittered Bonnie McBird towards the project. That's what, like, she had, like, I even fought to keep her name off of the credits.
Oh, like an Alan Smithy type deal?
Yeah. But, you know, for legal reasons, they couldn't do that. So after it reached, by the time it got to Disney, it had just gone past Information International Incorporated, who couldn't pick up and finance it, but they gave the advice of turning it into a live-action animation hybrid. Because doing the entire film out of animation and CG or a combination of both just was not feasible. It would not work at the time.
And for this episode, for the first time in a little bit, we actually have the physical copy with us. Right here.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, would you also like to mention the soundtrack?
Oh, yeah, of course. I have more I want to get into.
Oh, yeah,
So,
yeah, sorry.
no, you're good. So the Disney vice president at the time, Tom Wilhite, decided to take a gamble in the film. He thought it sounded interesting, and eventually he and the other creative teams involved with it, managed to convince Disney to financially back the project. According to the producer, Donald Kushner, the animation department at Disney heard about this film, and they got, pissed. They did not want to be involved. They felt like people were stepping on their toes and going into their domain. So, despite it being a Disney film, none of the animation in this is actually done by Disney.
That's as surprising as it is tragic.
Yeah, all the CG is split between 4 different leading computer animation companies at the time, including the aforementioned International Information International, and the non-CG animation was outsourced to the a name that most people won't know, but they are incredibly famous, which is the Chinese Wang Film Productions, which has a very long history as being one of those outsourced studios. If you've seen a lot of early Hanna-Barbera cartoons, they were one of the main outsourced studios for Hanna-Barbera. Production was complicated, so they had to shoot this on 2 different types of film.
Oh boy.
They shot it on 35 and 65 millimeter, and they had to shoot most of this on, most of the stuff you see in the Tron world is done on sets with tape, for the lines later on.
Oh, yeah.
For the computer lines, and it was shot in black and white, so there wasn't any color interference. Which is also why, if you look at the actual Tron suits, they have
that's
no
why
color.
their faces are gray.
Mm-hmm.
Which, once again, I have to emphasize, really adds to its whole original look and feel thing.
Yeah, and on the production scope of the end, there was some very famous people involved with this. Specifically, the main set and costume designer for this was Jean Giraud, who some of you probably know best as Mobius. Yeah, that incredibly iconic, famous comic book artist and just French artist in general, Mobius, did the main set and costume design for the film.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That tracks, too.
If you've seen any of those weird French animated films with, crazy designs, chances are it was Mobius. The vehicle designs were done by Sid Mead, and Peter Lloyd designed the actual environments. Now, I could go on and on about production and all the crazy stuff that was involved with this. Needless to say, it was a very hard film to make. So before we get into the plot, I want to talk about the composition. So for this, they could think of no better choice than, an electronic music score. They wanted to get in a little extra stuff, too. There are some non-electronic stuff, which is provided by... All the non-electronic pieces are provided by the London Philharmonic, and there's 2 original tracks by Journey. It was originally going to be Supertramp, but they had some obligations that they couldn't get out of, so Supertramp was off the project, Journey was pulled in. But the main score was done by the iconic pioneer of electronic music, Wendy Carlos. Before this, Wendy Carlos was probably best known for her iconic early electronic music album, Plug and Bach, I believe it's called. I forgot to write it down, but it's something like that. Carlos had done some film work before this, and even though Wendy Carlos does not have a very long history in the work of film composition, it is nothing but amazing. Because before this, Wendy Carlos's 2 film scores were A Clockwork Orange and The Shining.
Holy shit.
Both of which I argue would be much weaker films if it wasn't for their composition.
Without that score.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially her take on the William Tell overture.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That rapidly speeding up synthy cover of it.
Yeah, so this score was her first collab with her partner, Anne-Marie Franklin. It features a mix of analog synthesizers, which was like a Moog for the analog, the digital synthesizer, which I can't remember the name of, at
Roland?
no, something else, but and non-electronic stuff by London Philharmonic, some music from Journey. But Wendy Carlos is also probably one of the most well-known women in the realms of film composition, due to just having some of the most iconic film scores out there, in my opinion.
Looking back at her discography for preparations for this episode really blew my mind, because there were so many films that I was just completely unaware of that she is responsible for scoring.
Yeah, and she is our first, at least to my knowledge, our first openly LGBTQ plus composer we've covered on the show, which is why I wanted to make a big special out of this, because Wendy Carlos is also notable for being a prominent figure in the early fight for trans rights. She actually came out as trans in 1979 publicly.
Oh, wow.
And had her sex reassignment surgery in 1972. Wow.
One of the earliest and most publicized cases in America, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, along with that famous soldier from the 1950s who was the basis for Glen or Glenda.
Yeah.
Yeah. Since then, she's continued to work on various projects, mostly her own personal work. Hasn't done a lot of film work since then, but she's had some other interesting projects. Like, she's actually an accomplished solar eclipse photographer.
Oh, that's really cool.
Which tracks?
Yeah. And even worked with some other musicians. Her and Weird Al did a Peter the Wolf thing together.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So if you're going to take anything away before we talk about the plot of the film itself and get into the screening, it's that you should try to find Wendy Carlos' stuff. A lot of her stuff is not available on digital streaming services. So if you hear some of the music from this and you end up really liking it, go buy some of Wendy Carlos' solo work. You can find it lying around. It's a bit harder to find, but there have been re-releases, and just continue to support the trans community and donate to trans organizations.
Yes. My question is, now that we have the copy in our hand for the inevitable ramping plot introduction, should I do it this time, or should you, Aaron, the uninitiated?
I can do it because I am the uninitiated.
Yeah, it's
I've
more.
only seen bits and pieces of this movie.
Yeah,
so.
that's the fun of it. Go ahead and give us a
Okay.
read there.
I don't have my glasses. Let's see how this goes. Okay.
Whoops.
Do you want me to do it then? Or?
No, I can see it now.
Okay.
Okay. Experience the original landmark motion picture that inspired a new generation of digital filmmakers and became a favorite of fans and critics across the world. Relive the electrifying thrills of Tron with an all-new, state-of-the-art digital restoration and enhanced high-definition sound. This is on Blu-ray.
Mm-hmm.
When a brilliant video game maker named Flynn, Jeff Bridges, hacks the mainframe of his ex-employer, he is beamed inside an astonishing digital world that becomes part of the very game he is designing. Complete with never-before-seen bonus material, it's an epic adventure that everyone will enjoy.
Yep. And
It's a pretty short one.
Yeah, and if you care to watch along with us to see what the film's like, I recommend it.
It's on Disney Plus.
Yeah, that's the main place you can watch it, Disney Plus. It's pretty easy to find old Blu-rays and DVDs. Before we get into the screening, one last thing. As I said, I've seen this like once or twice before. I can't remember. I thought it was pretty good. It's been a while since I've seen it. We'll see if my opinions change. Erin has mentioned she's never seen it already.
Well, I haven't seen it the whole way through.
Yeah.
I've seen bits and pieces here.
And how about you, Rich?
I saw it once or twice. Both instances were probably about 8 or 7 years ago.
All right, so let's get into our screening of Tron and see what we think. Hey, we're back. We just got done our screening of Tron, and after breaking, we have come back, and here we are to discuss bit more of the film, the score, what we thought of it, the usual shtick here. So, yeah, I guess we'll start with Erin since she was the uninitiated.
So, I thought this movie was pretty good, pretty solid. Acting, pretty damn good. It's strange seeing Jeff Bridges in anything where he's under the age of 50. Because I'm so used to seeing him from Big Lebowski onward.
Yeah.
Special effects were fantastic. Like, the CG, especially for 1982, is just brilliant. And the soundtrack was chef's kiss.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah. The effects are one of the things that hold up better in this. It looks iffy in certain places, and Lisberger even said, like, there was points when they got the work print back, and he was like, oh no, because, like, he saw certain scenes, and he was like, wait a minute.
They're walking on glass, and we can see a reflection.
No, not even that. He was like, wait a minute. This is a computer. Of course there's going to be little glitches here and there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That is the mark of an imaginative artist there.
Yeah. And this is like second or third time seeing this for me. Everything holds up pretty well. Interesting little allegories for religious belief and persecution in here.
As well as AI.
Yeah.
Like being cautious of AI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And making sure you don't let computer programs do everything, and the importance of like a human controlling things when it comes to computing. The religious stuff's a little, not even a little, it's very on the nose. It's baby's first symbolism. They literally say religious beliefs when it comes to like the programs believing in users. But it's Disney. I didn't expect more.
Yeah, revisiting this has only made it age like a fine wine for me. The effects, as you both said, are really good. The subtext for a Disney film is very layered and very neatly woven into the narrative. The acting's amazing, and for me, this movie's identity and artistic direction are the highlights. You will not mistake any other movie for Tron.
Oh, of course not.
Yeah, and as I said, it created a lot of things, inspired a lot of things. Before the film came out, they actually released a tie-in arcade game for Tron, and
I was gonna bring that up.
Yeah, and it's actually, so people going into this would have actually probably been familiar with a few of the games because they literally created the games for the Tron arcade game in conjunction with the film. So you run through like segments of the film as an arcade game, like the light cycles, tanks.
I kind of like how the production and the narrative have some overlap, with the game developer stepping into this grand conspiracy and this digital world and being able to adapt because he wrote the code for the games.
No, it's got some interesting things going on. One thing I forgot to note that I found interesting is they specifically made sure that Wendy Carlos's pieces played inside the computer and the orchestral stuff played outside of the computer.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant.
Yeah.
I noticed that nothing electronic plays in the real world, and all the horn section stuff and the orchestral stuff is saved for outside the program.
Yeah, and the character writing is pretty interesting too. I enjoy Alan as a character, what little we see of him, due to the sheer fact that Bruce Boxleitner really nails down like the lawful good style character,
As Tron.
Well,
and as
Alan, yeah, like as Alan, he knows that Warner's doing something corrupt, and even though Flynn is like literally hacking into systems, embezzling money from Encom, he still helps Flynn because he knows that Warner is corrupt and the master control program he's working on is a bad idea.
That line delivery when he says, "You're embezzling from him?" It is just so. That is probably the most emblematic of his character.
Yeah.
I love how Flynn responds to that with, like, I don't like embezzling. It's a dirty word.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, Aaron, Jeff Bridges is just in great form with, honestly, a bit. I said Harrison Ford in the middle of screening, but he kind of reminded me a lot of Kurt Russell's more charismatic and sly characters.
I got a bit of Patrick Swayze out of him, to be honest.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I can see all of those similarities.
kind of like a little bit of Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse.
Yeah. And I just thought it was a pretty solid character archetype in general. You really like Flynn. You root for him. You like how perceptive and playful he is at the same time. The master program literally has to cheat just to stop Flynn before the movie even begins, because Flynn knew what programs to punch in to make the master control run that would cause it to be like distracted so he could easily get into the systems.
Yeah, like I feel like Flynn is basically what every nerd wants to grow up to be.
Oh, yeah.
Just this sly, playful, but knowledgeable jokester type whose demeanor doesn't diminish their skill or take away from what a danger he is to any threats.
Yeah, and funny enough, this movie's been credited by a lot of people of starting the Hollywood stereotype of like the sexy nerd, because Jeff Bridges kind of like, personified that, and he wasn't even originally intended to be what they wanted the character to look like. They wanted him to look like your typical gawky, skinny nerd, but Jeff Bridges auditioned and just had so much goddamn charisma they could not cast him.
Yeah. I also really like the performances of the actors who had to play dual roles as programs and as users.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes the creators of said programs have program corollaries, like, as we said before, Bruce Boxleitner, but especially David Warner, who is just
playing three parts,
all of whom are scarily distinct for one person.
Yeah, he's playing the NCOM president. He's playing
Sark.
Yeah, he's playing Sark. He's playing the MCP, and he makes them each distinctive enough to stand out.
The voice filter probably helped with the MCP, but he does a great role. He does great roles as the NCOM president, because as with that he needs to be a faux friendly, slimy
business mogul,
executive type who you can see the gears of malice turning behind smiles and just friendly
my last emails.
Yeah. Because you can David Warner plays really well the guy who knows he got to his position by stabbing backs, but that he doesn't have that much skill himself, and slowly realizes things are crashing down around him because everything's getting out of his control.
You can see it all written plain on his face when things start going pear-shaped for him.
Once the MCP starts acting more and more of its own volition, and once Alan comes in to be like, oh yeah, this is what my Tron program does, and he has this worried look on his face.
Like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And he tries to play it off and be like, oh yes, that's a very good program. We definitely want that around.
Speaking of the MCP, he's just got this cold, unfeeling, domineering tone that's aided by the vocal effects, but also by Warner's performance.
Very Orwellian, and I mean that in the actual sense.
Not in the far-right shithead.
Yeah.
Orwellian.
Actually read 1984. I mean, please, actually read 1984.
It's a great book.
It's a great book.
It's a great book.
So we made comparisons between the MCP and HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey, but there are things very much setting those two AI characters apart. and that main thing is that the MCP doesn't have the delusion of righteousness and commitment that Hal did.
Also, it's heavily implied that Hal's not running as functioned, whereas the MCP is running too well.
Yeah. Douglas Rain had a voice for Hal that was dignified and emotionless but objective. There's nothing foreboding about it until he starts doing bad things, whereas the MCP starts out 100% bully, essentially.
You know, it's funny. I'm thinking about how they were like, "Oh, we need a rock and roll edge to this movie. Let's put some Journey songs in here," and they're barely there. Like,
Yeah, they are barely there. I don't remember actually hearing the Journey songs in there.
there's 2 Journey songs. I think one plays during the credits, and if you pay attention, one is playing in the background of like the scene where they arrive at Flynn's arcade.
Yeah, at the arcade, because...
Playing over the speakers.
Which,
Yeah.
you know, it kind of aids the whole fun time 80s hangout spot atmosphere.
Yeah, and at this time, it's funny that this movie's also credited with like changing a lot of people's perceptions and images towards arcades, because in the early 80s they were still seen as like seedy places that you
Yeah.
didn't want your kids at.
One of those newfangled arcade places that your kids go to waste time on coin-eating machines.
Yeah, it's the same kind of stuff as like Music Man, when it's like, the pool hall. It's literally
Trouble here in River City.
yeah. It's literally like, you can't let your kids near that awful pool hall.
Yeah. I think it's funny how much of a through line there is between this and Chuck E. Cheese.
There really is.
Because
I just kind of was like, when I was doing research on this, I just started like putting pieces together in my head and started bolting things together.
you could tell too that kind of atmosphere kind of began with Flynn's.
Yeah.
That warm, everybody gets together and watch people kick ass on video games atmosphere, and probably the best non-computer scene is that establishing scene of Flynn in his arcade just stepping down from his office to just mess around
Hang out with the people.
have fun with the kids who are his main clientele, and just beat his own game and impress
Show his
everybody.
scores, you know?
There's even a scene when they're in the arcade. Actually, I think it was when they went upstairs to his apartment above the arcade, and they were saying, and they even state it was like, yeah, Flynn's main clientele is 14-year-olds, and he acts like one.
Yeah, he's like, his main friends are 14-year-olds. Why do you think he acts like one? You know, his ex says.
And he has like this look on his face, like, yeah,
Guilty as charged. You know?
it's funny that he would end up playing the dude. Like, I've
Yeah.
noticed Jeff Bridges is really good at playing characters who are comfortable in their own skins, even if they have noticeable vices.
Oh, yeah.
That's why he was as perfect as he was in that True Grit remake by the Coen brothers,
Yeah.
because who else could have played Rooster Cogburn?
Yeah, like I've said, hot take before that movie is, I just, there's only like one thing I like better about the original adaptation of True Grit, and yeah, that's basically it.
The original movie?
Yeah,
John Wayne?
yeah. Like, I think John Wayne sucks as Rooster Cogburn, to be fair.
Oh yeah, like he's just playing himself, honestly. The same kind of cowboy character. The one thing I say the original movie has over the remake is that Ned Pepper's actor is Robert Goddamn Duvall. So
Well, my
it's-
other thing I was going to say is Maddie doesn't feel as natural in the remake. She feels like she's already descended to this cold, calculating killer demeanor.
True, but it's the Wild West, so it kind of makes sense for her to be that far gone. Kim
Not
Darby
really.
kind of...
The original feels more like a girl descending into the very negative things that she should be trying to avoid, whereas the remake just feels a little too much like this is already an old and wizened kid that would have no qualms killing a person.
Then the movie kind of subverts that by the end, though, in a subtle way, where when she falls down a pit and gets the snake bite.
Yeah, I suppose. Each has their own merits. I just think that this is a Tron though.
Tron.
Wow.
Yeah, back to Tron.
Wow, that is a fantastic. This is
Fantastic diatribe.
yeah. But
Sorry
this
about
is
that.
a really fantastic just picture of not only the time but of what was going to come eventually. The movie does this really nice groundwork of illustrating to the audience just what a computer is like by showing, the light grids at the beginning and then turning the light grids into a bustling nighttime city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those transitions.
What I was gonna say unrelated to the transitions was certain scenes of this movie remind me of being a kid and taking apart electronics with a little screwdriver just to see what the interior looked like. Like, I was just one of those kids that if I was good at math, I would be a mechanical engineer. I'm terrible at math.
You and the rest of us.
Yeah, no, it just does a great job of I think scenes like that do a great job of laying out for the audience how computers work, what programs are like, and just how complex computers are by comparing it visually to a city.
Movie can be a bit tough to keep up with in certain parts, but it's to its own benefit because of how layered the whole computer business is.
Yeah, I can imagine that being a bit of a struggle especially for either an older audience or when this came out, or people who just weren't that familiar with computers. The film does a great job of visualizing it. Yes. Yeah. However, I feel like if someone isn't familiar with computers and they're not familiar with the movie if they were to go in blind, it may be a little bit baffling.
I agree.
A little bit.
Also, this was 1982 and not everyone had a computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were just emerging as
PCs.
As ubiquitous technology.
It was only the late 70s when they started to become consumer electronics really, and they only started to slowly get more of a consumer home product market throughout the 80s and really exploded in the 90s once everyone started to get home PCs.
Yeah.
I feel like my dad should be here just to talk about the history of computers.
Yeah. I'm just using my layman's knowledge of stuff I've learned from LGR and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
But it does a great job of showcasing what technology development and stuff was at the time. And I'm going to lean more into my theory that Flynn was Alan Bushnell because I did double check, and Chuck E. Cheese was founded just a few years before.
Yeah.
This. Yeah.
So he's basically the in-universe Alan Bushnell is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
I like that.
I mean, there was a character named Alan.
Yeah, exactly. And I even like how all of the characters, basically every single actor in this film, aside from the most minor ones, is doing double acting work.
And in the case, once again, of David Warner, triple acting.
Yeah, because even the guy who goes to David Warner's CEO character, who's like, I'm old, yeah, I've been here longer than you guys. He plays the one program inside.
Yeah, the gatekeeper.
Yeah, the gatekeeper style program. Even Ram is represented by the guy who asks if he could have some of Alan's popcorn.
Yeah.
That's the same actor.
Which, bit of an aside, everyone loves the dude who brings snacks to the office.
Absolutely.
Always feed your co-workers, especially the ones who are cool to you.
Yeah, and it does a good job of showing through subtle, just little character moments that we know Alan's a good guy who's comfortable at where he works, because not only does he have his own popcorn maker at his cubicle, when a coworker, as he's leaving clearly frustrated about something, a coworker innocently asks, hey Alan, can I have some of your popcorn? And he doesn't be like, hey, I can't talk right now, or lash out at the guy. He just goes, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, real friendly like. Yeah, he's got stuff on his mind, but he's like,
I'm not going to be eating that popcorn. I got business to do.
Yeah. And I'm not going to be a dick about it either.
Yeah. Nobody likes the guy who makes popcorn and hogs it to himself.
Nobody.
And if you're that guy who wants to hog popcorn to yourself, don't bring it to the office.
Yeah, not cool, man.
That's just rubbing salt in the wound. Literally.
Yeah, yeah, and butter. So, no, this score's brilliant. The orchestral work by the London Philharmonic outside of the machine is great, but definitely what everyone remembers from this film is the electronic music by Wendy Carlos.
A pioneer of electronic scores, if there ever was one. I wouldn't be surprised if Tangerine Dream's film scores owed a lot to her work in this and other movies.
Yeah, and this film just laid the groundwork for showing what you can do with digital effects, giving ideas to game makers everywhere, inspiration. It was very keyed into the video game landscape at the time. The tanks are clearly based off the old Atari program of the arcade tank programs and stuff.
Even some of the Gladiator games in the program world they owe a lot to old school arcade games like Pong, like that lacrosse game from hell where they're taking out the floor from under them. It had a very old school back and forth multiplayer type
and
atmosphere to it.
They literally visualized the fight against the MCP by turning it into a Breakout clone for the arcade.
Where Tron's bouncing his disc off of
the barriers to break
the barriers. Great action scenes for such an effects-heavy movie too. One could call them dated, but it's kind of impressive how well the actors are able to sell that they're bouncing off homing projectiles off each other.
Yeah, they do a great job of conveying the weight.
Like, you'd think that they wouldn't be able to do that because they're tossing around floating laser discs at each other, but like Bruce Boxleitner in particular does a lot of blocking with his disc that makes you feel like he just saved himself from getting his head chopped off.
Yeah. So, I guess I don't have a ton more to say about this.
I have one more thing to say.
Oh, please.
Okay, so my last thing to say about Tron, I mean, if we're going to be closing this out, are we going to, or do you want to talk a bit more?
I think we're pretty good.
We're pretty good. No spoilers either, really.
Yeah, not much we want to get super heavy into.
Yeah,
I think.
Honestly.
The one thing I can say is that this movie is very, very immersive.
Oh, absolutely.
Because usually when we're watching a movie, here on the podcast, like, I check my phone a couple times throughout the movie, or I'm like, hey, look, there's a dog outside. That's just how I generally am when watching movies.
Consequence of filming right by a dog park.
Yeah. But this is one of those movies where I was just, like, at the edge of my seat for most of the movie.
Yeah, I could see, like, she was really into it. I could see her go, oh shit, a couple of times at some of the more harrowing action scenes.
But the film itself, it grabs your attention and it keeps it, which is something I can very much appreciate.
Yeah.
Something missing on a lot of movies nowadays, to be honest.
Yeah.
And some of the movies we've covered on here. I'm not going to name any, but we've had some misses on the podcast so far.
Yeah, I would say it is a pretty solid film. I don't get as engaged by it as some people do. Some scenes feel kind of slow and like heavy to me in a way that like isn't good in my opinion, but I still think it's a visual effects treat. It's something I think if you're interested in the field of visual effects, you owe it to yourself to watch at least once because it's such a groundbreaking film.
One thing I wanted to get in was, as famous as this movie is for its CG effects, I really do appreciate how well woven in they are with the practical effects that are there. This movie's set design in particular is on point, and I get chills every time they zoom into the tank and you see the inside of that periscope, of that rotating chamber inside the tank where they're aiming around, because the lighting is pretty sparse and neon heavy, and the whole you don't see a set, you don't see cardboard or anything, you just see computer generated polygonal mechanisms.
I was gonna say the design work on this film was phenomenal. Mobius and the other people involved did an amazing job visualizing and like making literal circuitry like coherent to the eyes.
Not since H.R. Geiger has there been a more original sci-fi aesthetic for an individual film, in my opinion.
Yeah, you can see how this easily heavily inspired stuff like Reboot, for example.
Oh yeah.
Another thing I want to give a shout out to whoever the Foley artist was for this film, because they did such a great job in creating sound effects, especially because after we finished the movie, Richie mentioned that one of the sound effects in there is the sound of a corrupted hard drive.
Well, that's for a different movie, actually.
Oh, it's for a different movie?
Legacy,
I was talking about
Legacy.
I was talking about Legacy and how character who won't be named gets turned into a antagonistic force for the villain of that movie, and he makes a growling sound that is very much like the skipping sound of a corrupted hard drive.
Yeah.
But you aren't wrong about the sound effects in this one either, Aaron, because I was talking about earlier how one of my favorite sound effects is the sound of the discs flying at their path whenever they're thrown.
Yeah.
Like,
sorry, go ahead.
like that one moment when Tron's fighting Sark and you just hear and you hear that weird it kind of sounds like a theremin mixed with rushing wind.
Yeah, I feel like Foley artists don't get enough credit just in general, because people don't. Because, for example, I watched a video a couple years ago about Foley artists and everything that they go through just to get the right sound effects.
Oh yeah.
Like, for example, the sound of like someone like walking through mud, they'll like put their hands into a bucket of like yogurt or something, just to like squeeze their hands, go
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
just to make that sound.
They did a similar thing with Jabba the Hutt in Return of the Jedi. I think it was somebody mixing up mac and cheese whenever he flicked his tail or his tongue around.
Yeah, or another famous one, of course, the way they got the Godzilla roars by running a rubber glove across violin strings.
Was it leather or rubber?
Rubber.
Oh.
Yeah.
And of course, the Doctor Who warp sound is just car keys being run across a piano wire.
Or if you want to, of course, the lightsaber sounds are literally just like flicking around sheet metal.
Yeah.
I believe that Vader's breath was the inside of a respirator, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
I think so.
But overall, it's a solid film. Very interesting watch. It's definitely a good one to throw on if you want something that's not too heavy, that you can kind of even like keep on in the background and do something and still understand what's going on.
But also cerebral.
Oh yeah, but also with a bit of headiness to it, and some thought thrown into it. Great performances all around, amazing score. It's easy to see how this has spawned such a big franchise, like from games and books and even like roller coasters.
Speaking of games, real quick, play Tron 2.0 if you can get a copy of it on PC. It's a fun first-person shooter set in the Tron universe.
Yeah, and of course, Kingdom Hearts 2 has the original Tron computer world as a setting.
And it's been remastered.
Yep, and of course, Dream Drop Distance, if you can play that, also has the one based off Tron Legacy.
Yeah.
Real quick hot take. People claim that Dream Drop Distance is the bad Kingdom Hearts game. I very disrespectfully disagree. everything that people hate about its darker tone is exactly why I like it, but that's neither here nor there. Tron's great. It's in a class by itself, and it deserves to be looked at as much as it has been.
Also, if you can find it, some arcades still have Tron machines.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Ton of
give
fun.
that a try. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Even though I suck at it.
And
So do I.
they've released some, free website programs too. I think there's archives of some of the old phone programs. I remember I had a iPod with the original when Legacy came out. They did like a light bike game for iOS and stuff. So those were fun. If you can find any of those old abandonware programs, those are good too. And in closing, thank you guys so much for supporting the channel, getting us here to where we're doing a subscriber special. I didn't see this ever happening, and it does mean a lot to me. And if you guys could help take this even further with just a little bit of financial support, whatever you can spare over on Patreon, liking, sharing, commenting, just spreading the stuff around.
And just sharing in the joy of these three nerds talking about movies that only a handful of you awesome people have heard of.
Just that, I hate to hammer it in, but that's how all these things grow. And if you guys could do that, that would mean so much to us.
You guys
Also,
rock.
we have a Ko-Fi,
Ko-Fi, yeah.
however you pronounce it. We have that. So if you don't want to do a monthly Patreon, we always
You can give us
appreciate
one-time
even like a
donations,
one-time donation. Even if it's just $1, it'll help us.
Yeah.
Links in the doobly-doo, along with basically everything else, Patreon, etc.
Yeah, and
all of our individual stuff.
Of course, and we're also, as we said before, we are on Spotify. If you'd prefer to listen to it on the go, don't want to watch it on YouTube, just want to listen to the audio.
Except for the Prince of Egypt one, I fucked up there.
So yeah, just you can check those ones out. If we get more people on Spotify, that also helps us. Any way you guys can give us more support, we appreciate it, and we love you for getting us to 100 subscribers. For the 100 subscriber special, we're almost already at 300 because of you guys. This was a interesting episode, and when we come back, it'll be a few weeks since we did 2 weeks in a row, and we've got other stuff going on.
Yep.
But we will be back for our next theme month in May, and Aaron will be kicking us off with it.
Anime, that is.
Yep.
Aaron?
So my pick is a more recent film. My pick for anime, it's very cute, it's very wholesome, it might make you cry. And this, as I said, it's a more recent film. It's 2015's Penguin Highway.
18.
Oh, sorry, 2018. It's 5 years old. 2018's Penguin Highway.
Based off a novel.
Based off a very good novel.
See you later.